Many years ago, Twaandu was a village that used to be full of life. But now, it was just a dry, dusty land. The ground cracked under the scorching sun, and not a single raindrop had touched the earth for many seasons. The crops were gone. The livestock were dead. No one could remember the last time they had seen a healthy animal grazing or the fields swaying with golden crops. It seemed like the village had been forgotten by the gods. The villagers, once proud and full of hope, now stood with hollow eyes and empty stomachs. They had nothing left to live on, and nothing to look forward to. It wasn't just the hunger that hurt, it was the fear. Fear that their lives were being cursed by something they couldn't understand. The chief of the village, Lenku, stood watching over his people, heart heavy with worry. He had taken over as chief when his father died. But since then, things had only gotten worse. The rain stopped, the animals died, and the land grew barren. Lenku didn't know what had changed. What had he done wrong? Was he the cause of all this suffering? Had he angered the spirits? He tried everything, consulted with spiritual leaders, made sacrifices, and prayed for the rain to return. But nothing changed. The land stayed dry. The villagers grew restless, their murmurs louder. They began to whisper behind his back. Some even dared to say it out loud. Maybe the chief is the cause of our misfortune. Asterisk. It stung Lenku's heart, but the worst part was seeing the desperation in his people's eyes. They were forced to walk to the neighboring village to beg for food. His own people, once proud, were now reduced to beggars. It broke him. How could he, the chief, let this happen to his people? But in the midst of all this pain, there was one person who seemed unaffected: his son, Kivoi. He was a boy with a dark streak. From the time he was little, Kivoi had been different. He didn't cry when others did. He didn't feel the same way as the rest of the village. He was cruel, even to the smallest creatures. When Kivoi was only 3, he did something so awful, it haunted his father forever. One day, Kivoi had found a bird in the yard. Instead of letting it fly free, he plucked its feathers, one by one, watching it struggle. The bird tried to escape, but Kivoi only laughed. It wasn't enough. He set the bird on fire, staring at it burn, laughing the whole time. That memory, that horrifying image, stayed with Chief Lenku for years. It was as if the boy was born with darkness in him. Lenku didn't know what to do. Could his son be the cause of this curse? Could he have somehow brought this misery to Twaandu? Was Kivoi connected to the land's suffering in some way? He couldn't explain it, but he feared the truth. Perhaps Kivoi was the darkness that had descended upon the village, a creature made of cruelty and chaos. The village had lost its spirit, and Lenku was terrified that the darkness had come from the one person he loved most, his own son. It was a truth that shook him to his core. Could his son be the one who had caused the death of Twaandu? Was this the beginning of something far worse? Many years later, at the age of 23, Kivoi, the only son of Chief Lenku, had disappeared for days. Rumors spread that he had gone into the forest, but no one knew for sure. Now, he had returned, and the night seemed to hold its breath as the owls wouldn't stop crying. In the Twaandu village, that sound was a warning, a curse, a voice from the forest itself. And that night, the crying didn't stop. The owls' cries grew louder, persistent, filling the air with dread. The villagers knew that when the owls cried, something unnatural was about to happen. The last light faded behind the hills. Wind swayed the trees. The owls began crying again, louder this time, almost like a chant. Doors shut quickly, curtains were drawn, and silence fell over the village. Out from the forest, a cloaked figure stumbled forward, moving slowly but steadily. The villagers held their breath. A child, terrified, dropped a clay bowl, her hands trembling. And Dinda, the grandmother of the village, pulled the child back into the hut, whispering, "Get inside." From the shadow of a nearby hut, Chief Lenku, Kivoi's father, stepped out. His eyes narrowed as he stared hard at the figure emerging from the forest. He didn't need to ask. He knew who it was. "Kivoi?" Chief Lenku asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his tone a mix of disbelief and fear. The figure lifted his hood, revealing pale skin and eyes that glowed faintly green. A flicker of a smile crossed Kivoi's face, and he responded in a voice both cold and familiar. "You sound surprised, father. Did you think the forest would keep me?" The villagers, uncertain and murmuring, emerged slowly from their homes. They watched the reunion with a mix of fear and curiosity. Ndinda, stepping forward from the crowd, called out, "You crossed into the sacred ground. The forest does not return what it takes." "And yet," Kivoi replied, his voice steady, "here I stand, more alive than I ever was in this dusty prison you call a village." From the crowd, Ndinda spoke again. "Prison? You were raised as a prince." Kivoi's eyes darkened as he replied, "Raised like a bird in a cage, fed stories, forbidden to fly. You chained me with your old songs and small fears." "Those old songs kept this village alive for generations," Chief Lenku responded firmly. "Alive?" Kivoi asked, his voice mocking. "Or asleep?" A faint green light pulsed from beneath Kivoi's cloak. The villagers gasped, the light flickering like something alive. Ndinda, stepping closer, spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "Show us what you brought back." Kivoi smiled coldly, opening his cloak slightly. He revealed a stone pulsing, alive with light, breathing like it was a living thing. The villagers stood frozen in horror as the light danced across their faces. One of the young men from the crowd gasped, "What is that?" Ndinda, her voice filled with a sense of awe and fear, answered, "The heart of the forest." "You stole it?" someone asked, their voice trembling. "I didn't steal it," Kivoi replied with a smirk. "I claimed it. It chose me." And Ndinda, her face twisted in concern, spoke sharply, "It tricked you." Chief Lenku, his face hardening, called out, "Return it now, Kivoi, before it finishes what it started." Kivoi shook his head slowly, his eyes burning with defiance. "Number, you don't understand what this means." "I understand enough," Chief Lenku responded, his voice firm. "That thing you carry, it feeds on balance, and it's already hungry." Kivoi's expression darkened, his tone colder. "I won't give it back." Ndinda, her voice quiet but unnerving, added, "Then it will take you, piece by piece." Kivoi laughed bitterly. "Let it try." A gust of wind howled through the village, and the torches flickered, casting long shadows. The owls screamed louder, their cries wild and endless, echoing through the trees. From the back of the crowd, a woman shouted, "He's cursed!" A nervous man added, "The forest followed him." "Silence!" Chief Lenku shouted, his voice booming across the village. Ndinda stepped forward, her voice firm as she spoke to the chief. "You must choose, Lenku. Your son, or your people." Kivoi, his tone mocking, looked at his father. "Easy choice, isn't it?" Chief Lenku gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with anguish. "Not for a father." Kivoi sneered. "Then choose as a leader." The owls screamed again, and Kivoi began to walk forward, his eyes locked on his father. Behind him, something dark shifted between the trees, watching, waiting. Ndinda's voice echoed in the background as the scene unfolded. "The boy who left us was proud. The thing that returned was not alone." Ndinda moved 2 steps forward once again, with the support of her walking stick. This time, her voice cutting through the growing tension. The crowd fell silent as she began to speak, her words slow and deliberate, each one sinking deep into the hearts of the crowd that had already formed. "You don't know what you carry, boy," Ndinda said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You think it's power, but it's the echo of a promise, and the ashes of a curse." Kivoi scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "A curse? Another story to keep us obedient?" His tone was mocking, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Ndinda shook her head, her gaze hardening as she stepped closer. "No," she replied, her voice firm. "A truth buried so deep. The roots still bleed." The villagers listened in tense silence, but Ndinda's mind began to flash back to the stories of the past. She started remembering the old ways of the forest, her voice filled with pain and confusion as she spoke. "Long before this village was built, before we carved roads through the forest, There were others here, keepers of balance, walkers between breath and stone, and at the forest's heart, they guarded a single flame, the spirit core. Not fire, not crystal, but the living soul of the land itself. Kivoi's brow furrowed, but he remained silent as Ndinda continued, her voice growing more urgent. They never took it. They never owned it. They listened, but one among them grew impatient. She paused, the weight of her words heavy in the air. A young shaman, full of hunger, snuck back one night. He reached for the stone. It resisted him, but he didn't care. The forest begged him to stop. It showed him what he would become. But he did it anyway. Ndinda's face tightened. The forest rebelled. The trees bled black sap. The animals fled. The young shaman's body burned from within. His shadow split from him, becoming something hollow, something that would follow him forever. Kivoi shifted uncomfortably, but Ndinda's voice rose, unwavering. He didn't gain power. He split himself, one man and one hollow. The stone cursed him. And then, he vanished. The forest sealed itself after that. She looked at Kivoi, her eyes full of sorrow and warning. That stone does not give, Kivoi. It duplicates. You're not alone. You never were. Kivoi's face twisted with anger, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're lying, he spat, his voice trembling with a mix of defiance and fear. Ndinda leaned in closer, her voice almost a whisper, but cutting through the tension. Then tell me, why hasn't your shadow moved since you arrived? Kivoi's heart skipped a beat. His eyes darted down, and for the first time, he saw it his shadow, still, unmoving, wrong. Ndinda, still confused and filled with sorrow from the weight of years lived through hardship, said, I have lived through 5 famines, 2 great fires, and 1 war that turned the rivers red. But nothing like this. She continued, her voice shaking slightly as memories of the past flooded her mind. She recalled a time when the forest had no name. It was simply called the first breath, she said, because all life came from it. But as men built homes and crowned kings, they forgot the forest's name, and the forest forgot them in return. Ndinda then shared with the others a prophecy that had been passed down through the elders, told from mouth to mouth like a hot coal. We elders kept a prophecy, she began, that one day a child would be born under a sky with no owls, born in silence, born into blood. A child who would not belong fully to this world. He would find the stone at the forest's heart and awaken what sleeps beneath it. She paused before adding, not a beast, not a god, but the first hunger, the force that devours to begin again. Her voice lowered as she recalled the events of that fateful night. We called it a tale, a whisper to scare curious children. But I remember that night now, clear as fire. The owls did not cry, Ndinda continued. My daughter screamed. And from her, you came out, Kivoi. My grandson quiet as death. My daughter died moments later. The sky held its breath, and I buried the prophecy with her. But now, the prophecy had resurfaced. Later that day, in secret, Ndinda called a council of elders and Chief Lenku to the village square. She broke down as she revealed the truth. The prophecy. It wasn't about the forest returning, she said, her voice trembling. It was about blood. About our blood. It said the first hunger would wear the skin of one we love so we wouldn't see it until it was too late. We need to figure out how we can reverse this problem that Kivoi has brought to our village. As the day turned to evening, when the sun began to set, Kivoi sat alone in the nearby ruined shrine. The walls were thick with creeping vines, and he spoke softly to something unseen, something ancient and alive. They think I returned for power, he said quietly. But the truth is the forest sent me back. I am its mouth, its memory, its hunger. The stone pulsed in his hands, and the veins beneath his skin began to glow. His shadow writhed unnaturally, not following him but pulling away. trying to form something else. Not a prince, not a man, a vessel, Kivoi whispered, his eyes dark with the weight of his transformation. In his journal he had written, "To become the root, I must lose the name. Let the forest wear my skin, and walk again." After dawn, the clouds parted without warning, and warm sunlight poured over the square like a blessing. The rains had ended, the earth was soft underfoot, and the whole of Twaandu stood waiting. Kivoi stood at the center of it, all tall, still, and silent, with his robes brushing against the breeze. And though no one could see anything, many swore they heard a faint rustling behind him, as if the trees themselves were listening. He tilted his head slightly, just for a moment. Then he spoke. "The fields to the west," he said in a calm voice. "Plant the white maize there before the next full moon. It will rain that night. The soil will be soft." One of the older farmers raised his hand slowly, blinking in confusion. "But we've never planted that early," the man said. Kivoi didn't argue. He only smiled and replied, "The forest remembers. It knows the old seasons better than we do." The people looked at each other. No one moved. Then Kivoi turned toward the warrior chief who stood by the well. "Send word to the Oluma clan," he instructed. "Not to guard the border, but to prepare salt and cassava for trade. They will come in peace this time." The warrior frowned. "How do you know?" he asked. "I just do," Kivoi said, quiet, firm. At that moment, some villagers said the leaves behind him stirred though no wind blew. Others claimed they heard a whisper, too soft to understand, curling through the air like smoke. Kivoi turned again, this time to the carpenter at the edge of the crowd. "Beneath the new council hut," he said, "dig a stone ring, 7 steps wide. It must face east." The carpenter scratched his beard, unsure. "What's it for?" he asked. "The sky will tell us," Kivoi replied, "when it's done." There were no more questions. The people simply nodded and began to move. From that day they followed his voice the way one follows the sun, certain it will rise again tomorrow. By afternoon, the village was full of motion and joy. Children chased each other between fruit baskets. Smoke curled up from new kitchens. Women sang again. Drums echoed from the hills. Even the old ones agreed they hadn't seen Twaandu this alive in many years. Inside the council hut, Chief Lenku and his mother, Dinda, sat watching through the open window. Lenku broke the silence first. "He speaks, and they move," he said, "not from fear but with faith." Ndinda smiled faintly. "I've never seen Twaandu so alive," she said. "The land listens to him. Even the sky listens." Lenku leaned forward on his knees, thoughtful. "Do you think the stone really chose him?" Ndinda chuckled softly and said, "Or maybe he chose the stone, but the forest chose what to do with that choice." Lenku nodded slowly. "I thought I'd lose him," he said. "The boy I raised, he was full of rage. He broke things just to watch them fall. He looked out at the square where people worked in rhythm. Now, he builds. He leads." And Dinda placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "He has given us our name back," she said. "Before the stone was taken from our ancestors, Twaandu was a beacon feared, honored. We were people of standing. Now, they kneel before us again." Lenku looked at her and said quietly, "We lost our light when our ancestors lost the stone. He brought it home." She finished for him. Then came a long silence. And Dinda finally added, "Still, I'm proud. Even if something follows him still, he has done more for this village than any chief before him." Lenku's voice softened. "Even me." They watched a formation of white birds fly overhead, carving a clean line through the blue sky. But just below them, something darker moved. Reflected in the polished wood of the council post, they could see Kivoi walking away from the square. Only his shadow lagged behind. Just for a breath. And then it slithered forward, catching up again. They didn't speak of it. But Nadinda saw it. And she remembered.